Because it's 5. If you want to
Yes.
start now, I mean, you.
And we have a great, we already have about 51 people have already logged in. I think it's time we start. So a very warm welcome to all of you. And I will let my co-host Kritika Gupta introduce the topic and the virtual canteen. Kritika, over to you.
Thank you, Sunita ma'am. First of all, welcome all of you and thank you so much for taking out the time for the virtual canteen. Here we try to keep the conversations going, even though we might not have the chai or the samosa, but the banter should not stop. Our attempt here is to accept the new normal by discussing topics of importance, which specifically of interest to female litigators and lawyers on an easy and free-flowing, in an easy and free-flowing manner. Now the topic for today, seizing opportunities and ignoring the glass ceiling is the way forward. Now this is sort of a topic which female advocates often think about, but it is seldom discussed on public platforms. Why the need for this topic? There's been a story which is going viral that our Honorable Law Minister was asked about the representation of women in judiciary. And the answer which came was a little startling. Only 80 judges in Supreme Court and High Court after 1113 total number of judges. That's a mere 7.2%. Equally, if we look at the senior designations, out of the 420 which Supreme Court has handed over so far, only 13 women have made the cut. And for our very own Delhi High Court, only 9 out of the 237. But we have to be positive. Things are improving. If we look at the figures which are released by the Common Law Admission Test, the number of successful female aspirants is increasing day by day. In 2016, it was somewhere around 42%. In 17, it went up 43%. And in 18 and 19, it has reached a figure of 44 and 45%. So already our profession is on its way to become a more gender balanced and inclusive profession. And today we have with us our very interesting panel members who've been here for decades and who would love to share with us their experiences. What should we do right? What are we doing?
You're not saying centuries.
No, ma'am, you're all an institution in yourselves. You can only learn. You have to learn. So I hand over to Sunita ma'am to introduce our very magnificent panel members for today.
Thank you very much, Kritika. All the three names, all the three distinguished speakers that we have today need no introduction. However, I will take a few minutes to talk a little bit about them, which many of us do not know. For example, Geeta Luthra, Ms. Geeta Luthra, she's a designated senior advocate. She's a passionate, she's a very high profile and a very, very well-known criminal litigator, criminal family law, etc. What I found very interesting when I was reading about her is her interaction and her connection with international community. So it's not just the bar in India or Delhi Bar Association. She's actively involved with various international bodies, and some of you may find it very interesting because she sits as a member or a trustee of some of the prestigious international scholarships like INLAC and Felix and Rhodes, etc. Apart from that, she's continuously writing. So she's an LLM MPhil from Cambridge, and she continues to write, deliver lectures. So that's the academic side of her. So these are, and then we have with us Ms. Anjana Gosai. Ms. Anjana Gosai has been more than 40 years, like almost 42 years, she's been practicing law. So that is like almost as when I think she's been a part of the Delhi High Court institution when it actually came into existence. It's corresponding to that. The areas where Anjana ji has been practicing is like environmental law, aviation law. These are some of the areas which ordinarily when she started, they were not even very well known. And one of the interesting thing about her is how she's been deeply involved with the Project Tiger, wildlife preservation, whether it is whether Supreme Court taking wonderful initiative to protect our wildlife, our environment. Anjana Gosai ji is there. Her name is there. She's participated. She has spearheaded the campaign both inside the judicial, inside the court as well as outside. She has trained more than 8,000 forest officers in conducting investigation on forest crimes. So these are some unknown or less known, rather, I wouldn't say unknown people, I mean, who work very closely with her are very, very familiar with her work, but I'm sharing it for the larger benefit of our audience. Similarly, we have today Ms. Ritu Bhalla. She is a commercial corporate dispute resolution professional. She's a partner, senior partner with Sam & Company. And in fact, it's interesting to note that she's one of those first non-family members promoted as the partner in the firm. So which is like an achievement in itself. And throughout all the what is it, you know, the Sam & Company has gone through different levels, different phases of reconstitution, but she has stood there as one of the strongest members, one of the strongest person in the firm. So we have 3 people from 3 different areas, if you see, even within the litigation, and their combined experience on all 3 of them, it crosses a century. So that goes, ma'am, Geeta ma'am. So more than 100 years of experience. So with that, I would invite my speakers to give an opening remark on the topic and on their own individual journey. And after that, we will start, we'll put certain questions which we have in our mind and we would like all of you to answer. And then we will open the floor for the participants to ask questions. You can write your questions in the chat box, or if you would like, you can just write a message. You can just unmute yourself and ask questions. So with that, Ms. Geeta Luthra, ma'am, may I invite you to give an opening remark?
Yes, but you know, we are lawyers, so if you don't tell us the time restriction, you'll be talking till midnight.
1, 2, 3.
It's not paid. It's not a paid.
5 minutes, yes.
All right. So let me start with saying that for me, being a lawyer was a dream which I started dreaming when I was 7 years old. My father was a criminal lawyer, and I would sit passionately and cut out the evening news and other newspapers, because he would be all over the news since he was always fighting against the tide. And so I think that's where I learned this, that one can be a fighter, one should fight for what is right, and one should not be worried of being on the right side. But there came my strongest opposition in its own way. My father had not seen any successful women lawyers, and he thought his daughter was this gold medalist academician, so she should go in for the IAS or one of those services instead of doing law. Since I would be topping at every stage, he said, why don't you do the IAS? For him, that was the answer. But law was not the answer. Fortunately, all of us children, and my sister is a surgeon at a time when women were not surgeons, and I became a lawyer at a time when most women were not doing law. And of course, so it's been obviously with the support infrastructure of family. But one of the important aspects was that one learned to be, and it's again a tribute to family. What you do later may be some of your own doing, but what you do earlier is the foundation that is laid in you. And I would be a sportsman, I would do a little bit of debating. I was not so happy or easy about public speaking, but I did take part despite my hesitation. I had the determination to try and do it. Whether I was good or not does not matter. And I would be playing on the hockey fields, and my father would cross over from the High Court, come to the National Stadium to watch me play and to cheer our whole team. So what does law mean to me? Law means to me a lot because I've always felt it important to fight for the underdog and to also do a service for which I got involved with legal aid at the beginning. The philosophy in life being that the person who cannot, for reasons whether economy or politics or anything, have a voice to speak, let's try and give that person a voice. I think with that, the opening statement's enough. Otherwise, I'll go on.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, may I invite Ms. Anjana Gosain to give her opening remarks?
Good evening. I may say that though I joined the bar in 1978, it is my maybe first opportunity to express how I am hearing. Mine is a absolutely different story than that of Geeta, though of course I remember her as a running around student in the university. Mine is a case which, when I did my undergraduation, there was no goal, there was no dream, nothing. I have been a person born with a nature who always loved freedom, who always loved nature, but I had no decisive dream what I have to do. So all I wanted to do in our time, when I finished my graduation, that was in 1975, there were only 2 or 3 set professions you could look at. Become a teacher. If you are very bright, become a doctor. Chartered accountant was unheard of, or maybe 1 or 2 other professions which you could not think of. But I decided that, well, I must stand on my feet because I said I was always an independent person. And imagine what were the options? I thought of flying. I thought, let me apply to be an air hostess. And I did apply. And I got into it into Indian Airlines, the preliminary interview. And I did not inform my father. And I don't think my family, who's a part of it here today, my sister is here, my other members are there. They didn't even know about it that I had got. Then I had applied for Air India because aviation came later, but somehow that inkling was always there. So when my father got to know about it, he saw that letter. He said, what is this? I said, this is what I want to do. And imagine I applied for the course in YWCA for a secretarial course because I wanted to earn money. Quick buck was only this. That was at that time. But I still remember the lecture I got, but I was a born debater. So when I was undergraduate, in my graduation days, I was debating at the university level. But certainly I could never think of it that I'm going to take that debating into any other forum or make this something different. So my father said, I have never seen you picking up a plate, lifting a spoon, and here you are trying to become a cabin crew. My father was a very, very senior government officer. He said, is this all I have taught you? And this is all you're thinking? Your vision is absolutely, he was furious. But I said, Dad, I want to earn money. What's wrong in it? Is there something else I can earn money from? This is the quickest job I have got. Nothing doing. So what I remember, he picked up this and tore the letter which had asked me to come for my final selection, which was just 24 hours later. He said, by the way, who signed the application? I was quiet because I had sent it without signatures. I don't know how it went. Anyway, cutting short that, then he made me sit and he said, now you have finished your graduation. Enough is enough. I have seen the talent in you is of debating. And you have done political science. Please do law. That was something I had never thought of. And then he handed over 2 film tickets. This is something very interesting. And the name of the movie was Paper Chase. I'll recommend all one of you, if you can just go through and Google it. It was in the year 1973 and released sometime that 1974 or 75. He said, please try to see this movie and understand what is law. Life is logic. And I was greatly influenced by that film. And I think I'm forgetting the year, but just after that movie, I realized in that movie, they show how a student who's yearning to take admission into a very, very good university like Harvard. And then I wanted to speak about something, as my father used to be my best friend when I used to prepare my debates, and he was a guide. Then he said, look, you want to stand on your feet? I said, yes. You want to speak for yourself? Yes. You want to live on your terms? Yes. He says, then, since we are 4 sisters, by the way, and each one of us is professionally qualified and under the great influence of my late father, he said, then all right, this is the line for you, and I suggest that you make an attempt. Came the problem with the admission because I was already late. But be as it may, it was an accidental entry with no clear concepts, but of course, influenced by my father and suggestions. But I tell you, like within 24 hours of my joining the bar, that was exactly on 9th July, 1978, when I entered the High Court, and I fell in love. And I realized, I still remember when I entered the High Court, the chilling, the chilled air. 1978 was just 2 years. When 76, the building had been inaugurated, and it was just 2 years later. You had to wear double layers, man, around June, July. It was so different. And that is where I said, wow, what a place to work in. And number of women, I must tell you, there were hardly any. We could see Avnish, we could see Neelam Grover, who's unfortunately no more with us, Rekha Sharma, Usha Mehraji, Usha Kumar, and Uma Mehta, Mrs. Chopra. There were some of them. But they were so supportive. They were so supportive that, and we all used to sit huddled, like a group, because we only had one bar room for the women on the 2nd floor, which was converted. Kajal will remember how much we had to fight. Anyway, I know of the constraint of time. But whatever it was certainly a very challenging entry for us, because looking at the number around you, all you found were, male advocates. But not even once, I must say, you felt that you are in minority. Because the moment you stepped in, I had taken a vow to myself that I am here to stay on. I belong to this place. And I thanked my father within 24 hours of return from court. I said, thank you, Dad. You did the best thing for me, and I'm here to stay. And I can tell you, till the time I can breathe, till the time my physical and mental faculties allow me, I'm here to stay. So basically, when you enter this profession, when I entered at that time, we could just count few of us. But at the same time, everybody was motivating each other. And I'm very, very happy to say that in 1978 batch, some of my colleagues are still very active and doing so well. I'm talking about Sadhna Rana, I'm talking about Malini Sood, and we have Gitanjali Sharma, so many of them, and naming quite a few. When we have a batch parties, they are still very active. So all the young women, most of them are maybe of the same age as of my experience, maybe far less. All I have to say in my opening remark is this: don't go by numbers. The numbers are growing, and the numbers are less as we feel, because the women entered the colleges or the universities to do law much later, somewhere around the 70s. So you have to see the evolution from that time till now. But we have done very, very well. And I can tell you that we are going to do much better than what we have done now in the last 20 years. Things have changed. Technology has brought us to this level now, but I can tell you, even before that, people who are determined, who are interested, who really love the subject, and above all, the last thing I want to say, choose the option of litigation versus corporate as per your temperament. Don't get guided by any other force of relation in relation to finance, in relation to settlement. No, first understand yourself, what you want. Are you wanting to litigate? Then all the hardships are there. If you want to do corporate, be true to that line. All I have to say that whenever you have all entered, just remember one thing, you are here to stay. With these opening remarks, I may say, goals can come, dreams can go, but one thing is there, opportunities never disappoint you. Take them.
Thank you so much, Anjana Gosai ma'am. It was such a beautiful, inspirational, and I know a lot of people can actually, I'm actually getting a goosebumps just hearing your story. Now, after that, I would invite Ms. Ritu Bhalla. And as Ms. Gosai was saying, that you make your choices very well. You decide whether you want to be a litigator or you want to practice in a firm. You chose a firm to start your practice, and you have stayed in a firm structure. You have been into litigation, commercial dispute resolution. You are a trained mediator. How has your journey been, ma'am, so far?
Okay, so for me, the options were very clear right since my childhood. It was either that I would join the forces in a combat position, or that I would be a lawyer, because my role models were either from the forces, which was my father and an uncle of mine, or my other uncle who was a lawyer. So it was very clear. Extremely disappointed I was to learn as I went along in life that, in forces, women's role were very limited. So I did not want to get into the medical part of it or the JAG part of it. I wanted to be in the combative force, but that was not open for women at that point in time. So for me, law was the very natural choice. It was something that I always then wanted to do because I could not join the forces. Having joined the profession, I really wish I had a jaw-dropping and an eye-popping story of struggle and breaking of the glass ceiling and shattering of all the norms to tell. But seriously, if I was to tell such a story, it would really mean that I'm undermining the years and years of struggle and generations of women preceding me who had put in so much of hard work and effort to, if not completely shatter the glass ceiling, but to have definitely put it so far high above that its existence was really not visible. So there is no such story to tell. The struggle really, if I can share with this audience, is the struggle for breaking this glass ceiling formally started in 1916, as most of you would know, with Regina Guha applying to be admitted to the Calcutta bar as a practicing lawyer. And when her application came up before their lordships, they were rather flummoxed. Why? Because the Practitioners Act permitted any person with the required qualification to join the bar. Now, person under the General Clauses Act, as their lordships discovered, meant a woman as well. Now, what to do? But their lordships actually decided to reject the application, saying that they were reluctant to do what had not already been done. So they rejected her application. 5 years later, that struggle manifested itself in the application made by a lady called Ms. Hazra. She made an application to the Patna High Court saying that, I would like to be admitted. Patna High Court followed Calcutta High Court and rejected her. This was 5 years after Regina's application. Around about the same time, a lady called Cornelia Sorabji made an application to the Allahabad High Court. And lo and behold, Allahabad High Court allowed her petition, allowed her application, and she was admitted to the bar. And in 1923, finally, the discriminating act which did not permit women to join the bar was actually done away with. And that's where the journey of incredible women preceding me, generation after generation, came into play. And they have contributed so much to the profession. They have made life so much easier for us that I would have no hesitation in saying that, personally speaking, I never felt that there was a institutionally supported, sponsored glass ceiling. There wasn't. When I joined the profession, we had incredible judges. We had Justice Leela Seth, we had Justice Usha Mehra, we had Justice Sunanda Bhandare, we had Justice Santosh Duggal, Justice Kirpal, Justice Y.K. Sabra. I mean, the list is it can just go on and on. For whom gender did not matter. What mattered to them was preparedness. Is the lawyer who's appearing before them prepared with his or her brief? If they were, the orders were for them to take. But if they were not, they would not be spared, no matter whether it was a man appearing before them or a woman appearing before them. Great leveler, fantastic judiciary that I walked into. You talked about, Sunita, my joining the firm. I joined the firm in 1989, just about 1 year after I joined the profession. That's when Malvika Rajkotia exited what was then known as Shroff and Company. And I joined what was popularly called Shroff and Company at that time, which also celebrated meritocracy. There was no gender bias. Briefs and deals were not assigned basis the gender. Deals and assignments were not kept back because of gender. So really no institutional bias, no institutional sponsored glass ceiling. But yes, there were individual biases, which in my own personal story, I call them glass canopies. They are not glass ceilings. I call them glass canopies. And the wonderful thing about canopies is that they have four-way exits. So you really need to know that you're under a canopy and that these are the exits which are there. I will share, if you permit, one or two instances of, individual biases and individual perceptions which stand out in my story, in my head at least. Three stories very quickly. One of a judge. I was barely about 2.5 years into the profession. And there was this particular honorable judge who I started getting a feeling was very dismissive of me because of my gender. I mean, there was no other explanation for it. And things got so bad that my peers and seniors at the bar actually started noticing it and started, coming up to me and saying, what's going on over here? So I decided to seek audience with the honorable judge. And I went into his chamber and I said, Judge, what's happening here? I'm quite flummoxed. I'm quite taken aback. So what's really happening here? His answer stumped me, and it has remained with me after 34 years at the bar. He said to me, Madam, and that's one phrase I absolutely detest. It is so condescending. It is so dismissive. It is so non-acceptable. Well, anyways, he said to me, Madam, there are two things about you that I don't like. One, I don't like your face and the confidence on your face. And two, I don't like the fact that you're always prepared with your brief. I was not ready for this answer. So I looked at him and I said, Judge, my face I was born with. My confidence is in my DNA as a woman. These are not going to go away. They're going to remain. As for being prepared with my briefs, my client pays me for it. So that's not going to change either. So here's good luck to you, Judge. May God give you the strength and the ability to live with such faces and such preparedness. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm never ever going to appear before you. That's one story. The second story is of a client. So from the innumerable numbers of clients that I have interacted with, none of them have ever looked over my shoulder to see, is there a man there who can give me an advice? Is there a man there who can, tick mark what she's saying? Never ever. They've always given me the respect that a professional would get, provided you're talking sense. But there was this one client. His case was particularly complex. It required a lot of innovative and a lot of out-of-the-box thinking. And hours and hours were spent. But every single meeting that I would have with him, whether it would be attended by 2, 3, 4 people or a dozen people, no matter what, the meeting would start with one sentence coming from him. That's a lovely sari you're wearing. Is it Lucknowi? Is it Kamdani? Is it Jamdani? Is it Banarsi? And I'm like, I don't know. I've just worn a sari. I don't know what it is. But it went on and on and on. Till one day I actually, told him. I said, Mister, my sari is not doing the thinking for you. My brain is. Okay. Now, if you've got nothing to say about my brain, that's fine. My work will speak for itself. But please spare me this putting down of my professional self by giving me what you think is a compliment. It's irrelevant in my scheme of things. That's the second story. And third, and I will not take any more time. The third story is of a couple of, actually 2 or maybe 3 senior colleagues at the bar. What I took to them was my brains. What they saw was my anatomy. And it was something that, what we call the indecent proposal. So the indecent proposals were made. I tackled it. I'm talking about individual biases, individual perceptions, individual glass ceilings. I gave it right back. I knew how to deal with it. But what let me down was not the institution, but few people who could have stood by and who could have made a difference and who could have added to the strength of my voice. But that did not happen. So really, just to sum up, I think I'm a firm believer that there is no institutionally sponsored glass ceiling, but yes, individual glass canopies are certainly there. Sorry, I've taken a lot of time.
Thank you so much. And there were so many moments during the point that you were speaking that I wanted to unmute myself and clap. It was a pleasure listening to you, ma'am. And I really like the way you put it, that there are no institutionalized glass ceilings in this profession. And and in fact, when you were talking about this, your own experience, and I remembered Muthamma's case, where one of her grievances was the chairman later on, she's the first IFS lady, and the chairman later on came and told her that I gave you least marks so that you would not qualify. And then she went on to challenge that rule in the foreign service, civil services, which says that you have to take permission from the government before getting married, and the government can ask you to resign if you get married. So the judicial structure has actually pushed or broken these glass ceilings from so many other areas, whether it is film industry or for that matter, Air India, or the bureaucracy itself. And coming from you, who has spent decades with judiciary and making a statement that judicial infrastructure here is not, the glass ceiling is not structural here, but yes, there are individual biases. And with that, I have one question, because all three of you have had immense experience both dealing with Indian bar in India, practitioners in India, as well as international. And after asking this question, I would give, because my colleague, my co-host Kritika has some wonderful questions for all of you, but this is, how do you see the difference? Is it somewhere, are there struggles similar to struggles as we face, or as we are doing as far as India, women in bar in India are concerned, or do you see any any difference? Are they at a different level, or we are at different levels? How do you see it in your own individual experience? Because all three of you deal with international clients, international bar, international institutions. So I would, in fact, I would request all three of you to respond to that as per your choice.
Right.
Whoever can speak first, ma'am.
Yeah. So the question that you are asking is the answer is really that I feel that they are perhaps 2 decades ahead of us, if not more. So even now, they face the same biases. I feel that when we say that perhaps there were no biases, or the biases are perhaps not as pronounced, I want to give an expression of what some of the lawyers in the UK feel. And there today, we have a larger percentage, maybe a 50.1% of women lawyers as compared to male lawyers, particularly the in-house solicitor practice as compared to the litigating practice. So the first aspect which we must be, a law firm is a very protected environment. You're not talking of law firms. So I just want to explain this. When Ritu was talking, she's gone to a law firm where there were a husband and wife team heading, where the wife was equally a partner, and thus the environment was already ready to receive solicitor / arguing counsels within the law firm on a more equal plane. Having said this, I want to give Pallavi's own example when, in fact, for a similar talk, I had called her as president of LSI Alumni Association, and I was also one of the speakers, where she said that my husband's sometimes had to push clients my way when we started, because they felt they had to go to the male counterpart. Their confidence was there. So we can't forget this aspect. Now, insofar as those countries are concerned, they say, why is the percentage of our QCs lower? Why is the percentage of women who join the profession to start with at the junior rungs, oh, all right, but by the time they become seniors, they are not coming at an equal level, and they are as competent. So the questions are there for all of us to see. I don't want to alarm the young people, because I'm telling you, things have changed drastically. When I, Anjana, came into the profession, we were lone people in the woods. But the fact is, today, you would never feel that there's, I recall one of my classmates or colleagues who went and started practicing in Patna and later in Jharkhand. I think it was in Jharkhand High Court. And she said there was no woman toilet. So she said at 3 o'clock I had to go home. So what do I do? So see, there are issues and issues. We are talking and that's why when you brought up the issue, why are we not having women seniors? Why are women lawyers dwindling off? Surely men take time off too. They may not take time off at a consistent rate because women are looking after families, and we can't forget this aspect. Women are looking after families, they're looking after children, they're looking after parents, maybe to a larger extent than the men are doing. But at the same time, then they are taking out time from socializing because then they're giving more time to all this at some point in their lives. Then why should, so I'm not talking of glass ceiling. I've never looked at glass ceilings. I've never looked at myself as a woman when I've gone in the courts. I just feel that I'm defending a client. I don't know my gender. I don't look at anything. But the question is that whatever it is, why have we not done as well? And the voices are now beginning to speak up. That's why the law ministers now, because it's such pathetic figures. So when women are greater in number, they will speak up. And they will, and about Justice Leela Seth, what was, one of our friends talked about Justice Leela Seth. She's one of the senior most women judges. Why did she get a high court with only 2 judges? Why did she get a high court with 2 judges? There were such large high courts. I feel that, honestly, she needed to get a high court which had a bigger strength. So we can't forget these facts. We can't gloss over these facts. At the same time, to answer your question, let's look at the other countries. Whether you look at the US, you look at the UK, they have the same perception. They may be 2 decades before us. In 1980, I went to Paris to the court. At the same time, during my period in Cambridge, when I was doing my graduation, I used to go to the UK courts. And the fact is that in those courts, you saw so many more women lawyers. Those numbers were far larger, and we are seeing that happening in India. It's such a happy trend. But for women lawyers, solicitor work becomes much easier than litigation. That's there even in those countries, even today. And that's why so many women's group, which is the WWCDA, which I was talking about, or the IAFL, which is for women and male lawyers, and so on. One is to do with crime law. And we recently had, because I do a lot of arbitration work, and I'm the vice president of ICA, there also we had a big group of arbitrators who said that because of wanting to give equal opportunity, because women are enough now to raise a voice, we want women arbitrators, but we are not having enough women as arbitrators on our boards, despite the fact. So women have to come out to help women. So maybe I've given a longer answer than you wanted, but the fact is that if we are looking at other countries, there also, they may be 20 years ahead of us, but and we are talking of ceiling as not a word, but the fact is we have yet miles to go.
Thank you, Ms. Luthra. It's very important. I mean, I like the way you make that point about, yes, they may have their own challenges. They may have their own struggles. They may have had their own, the milestones to cross. But what is heartening is the growing number itself has contributed. It has provided as a feeder for having a more stronger voice, more better and more structured representation for women, and perhaps a greater collaboration at international level led by you, because you're already in so many organizations. And I hope more and more of our bar members who have joined us today in this discussion will connect with you to see if we can take this forward. Ms. Anjana Gusai, may I just take your response on this point? Because on the environmental law, and on the issues of wildlife protection and the preservation of environment, you have collaborated, you have represented India at international fora. What has your experience been so far?
Well, I may tell you that when I started this merging of passion and profession together, the first thing is this, that when you have to be strong, you have to be first strong at your home turf. And I encountered, which I was sharing before we started, the first, I can say, what Ritu shared and what I had to go through was, the first shock I was that because of my studying in undergraduation, and in those days, your outfits were like, you could wear jeans, anything. So when we started in the profession, the first lesson I got was from some of my seniors that, sari pehno. And I had short haircut. So they said, nahi, ye nahi chalega. Balon ko lamba hona chahiye. I said, all right. So I had, in the month of July 78, I joined. And I remember I started growing my hair. Of course, I looked awful, but whatever it was. So I was wrapping myself in a 6-yard sari to look Bharatiya Nari, to be a lawyer. So, whatever you are inside, you cannot be stopped. So within 3 months, the inner self revolted. And I said, enough is enough. And then went and bought white and black cloth. And I said, make a salwar, please, enough. I cannot wear this sari. And that's it. So in July 78, I had joined, and by December 78, I may say I was the first one to adorn a salwar. Now, we used to get this gowns and all that, whatever it was. So when I appeared, I was at that time working with the late Lala Ram Gupta ji, which I have this incident I will definitely share with all of you. And Justice Prithvi Raj, he was the court where I was in. So I was just behind my senior when I'll take up your foreign issue because this is connected partly. So within 2 minutes, Justice Prithviraj said, this young lady keeps coming and attending the court. Who is she? Formerly, I was, with all respect to the departed soul, with all practical purposes, I was in his chamber. He looked back and he said, sir, she is daughter of so-and-so and she wants to join the profession. मैंने इनको कहा है ये फील्ड लड़कियों के लिए नहीं है. मैंने बहुत समझाने की कोशिश की है, but she's adamant. I could see Justice Prithviraj getting offended. He says, if she wants to be at the bar, what's your problem? Immediately I came out and I said, sir, I'm no longer your junior. I do not wish to work with you. And वो तो ठीक है, but uniform तो आपने पहनी नहीं. मैंने कहा क्या? What do you mean uniform नहीं पहनी भाई? I am fully dressed up. So his question was कि साड़ी वाड़ी का काम हो. That is the time when I was summoned by 2 judges separately, and they said, we don't recognize you because the uniform which is acceptable is this. That is when I said, sir, you have to recognize this fact that I am in black and white. It is, where is it written that it is only to be stuck to 6 yards? So I was the first one, I may say so, at this platform to raise this issue. And with late S.K. Puri Sahab, we took up this issue and for the bar, and that dress code still remains the same. We worked out for skirts to saris to salwar kameezes. I'll only end here that was the germane or the seeds which I sowed for myself and for the future, that whatever you have to decide, nobody is here to tell you what to do. Comfort zone is your own level. And that is how dress is not a part of the profession, but yes, looking, you cannot be scummed on that fact that this is what is finally. Then I traveled, my journey began from there, and that is when environmental law came. And Geeta was absolutely right. My interaction has been with the women lawyers in the US. I've also dealt with the bureaucrats, and I have a story to share that things are absolutely the same. All women are the same. We are all facing the same situation and all the inherent situations. There is no difference. When my proposal went for my organization, Tiger Trust, I had to send this to a kin department called US Wildlife and Service, where I had to send my proposal. I was given appointment, I met, and it happened to be a lady who was the one who had to look into my proposal. And there were two lady lawyers who had to do the deliberations and you can say due diligence on my antecedents and the trust's antecedents. And that is when I had personal interaction with them. And two of my friends also became judges at the High Court of Massachusetts. There were two of them. And that is where I attended 3 conferences. And I tell all of you, all 16, 15, whoever they are there, that there is no difference in the feeling whether you have to be elevated. They had the same stories to share. They had the same inherent issues which we are discussing here. But as I said, that all women there and here have to remember one thing. Do not recognize the bias. The moment you start recognizing the bias, then you are trapped. You have to be away from the bias, recognize it and kill it. You have that instinct in you. For that, first of all, you have to have the strength in you to be strong. So the difference I found there was that there was little bit more recognition to the fact of your talent. I see such bright girls here arguing, but then I don't see them later. I don't see them later because maybe it's a one given opportunity, they got to argue and then there's no. There is in those places, at least if you have a merit, if you have something to talk about, they recognize. I'm not saying there is no recognition here. There's plenty, but it has only happened now. So my journey has been fairly painful in the initial years when I had to work 10 times harder because after marriage, after having a child and managing the time, everything, as Geeta rightly said, there are aspects which I will not take as weaknesses for a woman. I would say they are inherent situations. When you choose to take a personal decision regarding having a family, being with the family, there is no way you can cut yourself and say, I'm a lawyer, so my duties are this. No, this is something, take it as an inherent situation. Don't take it as your weakness. And same thing I found in the US also. She could not conceive till she was 43. Geeta, she is a very well-known sitting judge. And she conceived after maybe 7 years with certain process. And I could see that. She sent me a mail, and it is right till here. She says, Anjana, glass ceilings. That's why I decided this is what it says. She says, I trashed it, I crashed it. I have no way to say what made me think about it, but these 2 little babies which I have is right now my glass ceiling. So young ladies, glass ceiling is something which you have to consider. Opportunities, not even beggar gets an opportunity, should I tell you? Every person gets an opportunity, only you have to recognize. In the foreign situation, I'm not saying US is higher or England is lower. India is great. Every country is great, but you have to be greater than that. See the opportunity, accept it, and learn to use it in the way you want. Don't let others give you an opportunity and dictate how to take that opportunity. If I have an opportunity to speak somewhere, I don't have to be blasting things around. No. Something, it has to come from here. What my opportunity is, what I have to do. So basically, whether it's England, whether it's saying, we all women are global, our minds are global, our situations are global, but opportunities are totally different. Fix an opportunity, use it. Whether you take it as a glass ceiling, it is your goodwill. It is your own option. But at the end of the day, you have to merge the two and get something which is right here and in the heart. This is what I'll
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for these inspiring words. And your story on the dress code actually reminded me of what Justice Leela Seth has written in her biography. When her name was suggested for judgeship, she was made a subtle inquiry that, do you drink wine? And when she said yes, so she was advised that when there is a inquiry is made, formal inquiry is made, she should say that no. And what she writes is that Well, I refuse to do that, because if I can't speak for my own right to drink wine or to eat, then how will I defend the rights of thousands and millions of individuals? So beautiful story, ma'am. And with that, I will come back to Ms. Ritu Bhalla. And because we corporate, as far as the corporate world we see, which is more glamorous and which is more commercial and more, you obviously deal with a different kind of client altogether. So just a quick question on the international aspect of and comparison, because I'm just completing that loop. I know we are running out of time, and Geeta ma'am has another webinar, but I will request you to just hold on for a few more minutes. We'll just listen to Ritu ma'am, and then perhaps take questions.
Sure. Just two things. Geeta, I'm grateful to, like I said, women before me, whether it's Pallavi, whether it is you, whether it's Anjana, to have, made the task so much simpler for me. I'm not, taking away from that at all. It's because of what all of you all and women preceding you have done that the journey has been the way it has been. Now, I think the other very important thing that both Anjana and Geeta, you have said, is that internationally, women may be a couple of decades ahead of us. But at the end of the day, the problem of women professionals is universal. But why are they 2 decades ahead of us? That is something that I would like to, talk about. I think they have cracked a very important distinction, and we need to do the same. The distinction is between doing our jobs and planning our careers. There is a difference. There is a huge difference. We spend a lot of time, we give our 2000% to our jobs, to the work, to the briefs that are assigned to us. We give it our everything. Every single brief takes away a part of us. But we do not plan our careers. And they say that if by your mid-30s you have not planned your careers, it's going to cause you the top AOPs.
From system server, low battery.
It's going to cause you your, top AOPs.
Battery monitor, low battery.
Sorry, what's that? I don't know, something seems to be wrong. The top AOPs are the top assignments, the top opportunities, and the top positions. So whilst we are working very hard at our briefs, we forget to plan our careers as a senior counsel. We are not looking at that. Whilst we are doing our job very diligently, we forget to plan our career as a judge. Do I need to be a judge? When we are doing our jobs, we forget to plan our position as a partner in a law firm. So I think why internationally women may be a couple of decades ahead of us is because they have been able to make the distinction between jobs and careers. And therefore, we must spend equal amount of time and effort on our careers. The second thing I want to very quickly talk about is, the tiara complex. Okay, a lot of us have that tiara complex. Our achievements, our accolades, we just poo-poo it. Oh yeah, all right, okay, fine. I've got this award. Let's move on. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. A man gets an obscure award. The entire town will know. The baker will know, the bakery will know, their dog will know, even the loaf of bread will know. But we do not project our achievements. We wait for somebody to look for us and put that tiara on our head so that we can then be perceived as leaders of our game, to be perceived as forces to reckon with. Internationally, women have moved away from that complex, the tiara complex. Third, and very quickly, sorry, because that's what my conversation with women in the international bar has made me realize, is the ability to take risks, right? And I don't mean that, we take risks as in, do something foolish. Risks as far as career opportunities are concerned, right? There are greenfield practice areas, and there are male dominated, or at least perceived to be male dominated practice areas, right? Now, every time there is a greenfield practice area emerging, like for example, when Anjana started as practicing in the environment law, it was a fledgling practice area. Perhaps people thought it's inconsequential in the scheme of human existence, right? But it was not. It has today become one of the most important things. So when women identify practice areas, greenfield practice areas, then they get into leadership positions. Then they get ahead of the curve. Then they get noticed. Then they get leadership positions. Likewise, practice areas which are unfortunately, because of whatever mindset, are perceived as male dominated. Tax, white collar crime, economic offenses, or your economic assignment matters. Why are we keeping away from those? We need to, yes, it is very important. We are making such a difference by practicing family law. We are making life so much better for our own kinds who don't have those opportunities. We are making life very good for them. We are doing great in family law. We are doing great in human rights, wonderfully well, right? But at the end of the day, the country also has an economic fabric, right? Why are we holding ourselves back from moving into those practice areas? Internationally, women have therefore started doing that. And that's why they may be ahead of the curve by 20 years or 25 years or 30 years. We do not want to be left behind or lagging behind. And therefore, these three mantras, I think we need to internalize. Job versus career, they are not synonymous. They're very different. Please, let's not be risk averse. Let's not have the tiara syndrome. For example, we've all heard of Vrinda Grover, right? I mean, we all admire her. We all love her. She's my batchmate, great friend. But how many of us know that she has been named as Time's top 100 most influential people, right? She's not talked about it. And why ever not? She should, right? We should project our achievements, our accolades, and then it's going to be that we are going to get into leadership positions.
Thank you so much. That AOP, assignment, opportunity, and practice area. This is, I think, this will guide. This is going to be with us for rest of our professional career. Thank you so much for giving that capsule form. I would invite. I know Kritika has some questions lined up for the speakers today. Kritika, please take over.
Thank you so much for speaking so wonderfully, and you've preempted our questions and answered so many of them already. But I have this small question for Ritu ma'am first, because she has just spoken so beautifully about that women don't recognize their own achievements. Ma'am, on a lighter note, do you think that the kind of camaraderie we see with the male colleagues at the bar is missing within the female colleagues, and the impact it could have in a very long way on rising, in helping us rise all together? The boys would have an equivalent for that.
No, I think women have an amazing camaraderie. They have an amazing connect because their problems are the same. Their challenges are the same. Having said that, at one of the canteen sessions, a very pertinent question was asked, and I want to address that, which was, how important is networking for a woman? I think you just cannot stress it enough. It is very important. Now, that networking can come from, women, aligning their synergies with women, and women aligning their synergies, outside of that circle. Because network will give us two things. It will give us visibility, and it will give us recognition. Now, visibility and recognition, according to me, are the paths to leadership positions. And till we get into the leadership position, things are not, the more they'll change, the more they are going to remain the same. So yes, I have had women friends stand up for me, every single time there has been a need for. I have reached out to women colleagues, senior to me, sometimes even junior, if I need, some kind of advice, some kind of guidance. And therefore, I think the women camaraderie can never be underestimated. Its value can never be underestimated, but never ever should that come only as the answer to networking. No, networking is something totally different, and we should be paying due attention to that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Definitely. Ma'am, I would like to take the next question for Geeta, ma'am. I know she's in a hurry. And ma'am,
Don't worry. I'm more or less given that up. So, because that was supposed to end at 6:20 or so. So we'll don't worry. Go ahead. We'll see.
Ma'am, you so wonderfully spoke about that even though more and more women are coming, yet there is a disconnect. We do not find as many as arguing councils or women leading chambers. And on that, Indra Nooyi once made a comment. I remember that, your biological clock and your career clock is always at, loggerheads. It's always in conflict. So we would like to tap into your personal experiences, all three of you. How did you manage it? Some sort of mentoring tips for all of us, because the numbers have to now convert into more and more women continuing in litigation and law, which is somehow not happening. What is your take on that?
So I feel that perhaps this is a balance. Everyone has to work for themselves. So the first thing, and we can't undermine this, as Anjana spoke about her father, that once I decided, my family was extremely supportive. And my mother was a professor, and she'd given it up to bring us up. So she helped me with Shivani. I had this whole infrastructure of a support system. But ultimately, there are many things which you have to do yourself. You're working 16 hours a day. You are client dealing. Your courts are so unorganized. From 10 to 4, you'll be in court even if you had only item 1 because it's been passed over. In India, we work with many other factors which I think in other countries you don't have, because you'll have your 2 cases, you'll know your timings, and you'll be able to adjust your clients. Here, the moment I say today I'll get free, I'll call a client at 2. Pat, the judge says, I'm fixing your case at 2, Ms. Luthra. You have no answer. So this is, our time management actually goes haywire however much we try. And with families, you have to have a great familial infrastructure. And I'm giving a comparison of a very close friend of mine who is lecturing in Chicago University, and she was with me in Cambridge, and she was at Yale in law school. She said, I'm not going to have children because I don't have anyone to bring them up, So we do have a familial support. You have domestic support. So there are lots of support factors which we have. But at the same time, you do have to bring up your children yourself. My daughter, who's a lawyer, tells me that I am what I am despite of you and because of my nanny. So this is the comparative thing that you can say when you're talking of a familial system. Now, it may sound, I was a voracious reader, but very often, once I became a lawyer, my zest for learning was so much that my husband would be asking me, what are you reading? I said, I'm reading Mulla's Hindu Law, leave it. And this was general reading. It was not for any matter, but he thought this is a mad woman. But anyway, that's okay. So question is, you have to have a love of learning. You have to love your work. You can't be working so long. And you have to think, I feel, maybe, and that's why I worked in Tihar jail and I've worked a lot on legal aid, is I thought that it is a service. But while I say that, I think Ritu's made a beautiful point. You have to think of it not just in excelling in your job. And that's, people like me haven't done it. So that's why I'm saying that you can learn from our mistakes. You have to think of the career. I think she made a beautiful point and I liked it very much. I wanted it to stay with you. So look at that. Look, if you need to move on, move on. Don't sit in a comfort zone if you, just because it's a comfort zone. Think of career. So all those things having been said, fact is that when you are involved in a case, then you tell the whole family, hey, fend for yourselves. I am sort of buried, snowed under.
Yeah.
And so if you are needing to travel, you will be traveling. If you keep saying, and then you are balancing all these things. So you're paying, you are doing much more a balancing act that any man would be doing. Now, I just wanted to come back to Ritu's point about the camaraderie of women. And I don't want Anjana and any of you to comment. I feel we need far more camaraderie. I feel women will not brief women seniors. I feel when women need a male junior or a junior to do some drafting, and they may have choice of women and men. And this is a point that Shivani, my daughter, was making, and she felt strongly. She says, look, if it's a choice in a criminal matter and you want to send somebody to the police station, why do you prefer the male junior? Why don't you want me to go? I mean, she's now on her own, but she was saying, she says, the fact is that you would want me to go, but you'll say, why don't you take one of your colleagues along? So there are aspects which, if we make ourselves and our country safe, and we have enough numbers, then these questions will no longer be asked. So we are getting there. We are getting there slowly, but we are getting there.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I've come back to Anjana, ma'am, now on this question, ma'am. So do you think it's only time management, and is it something else that is required from side of our colleagues, maybe the bench, maybe the bar council, that you think would help us, the numbers to grow?
Can I say it has to be a cocktail of what Deepa said, what Ritu said, and what I'm going to say. So it's going to be a margarita. Anyway, I would say I did plan my career and I still plan my career, number one. Number two, the moment I joined the profession, I had a vision, what I need to do. So I would endorse what Ritu said. You cannot take this profession as a casual thing. You have to make full planning and understand what you are. Khud ko pehchano. This is the first point. Number two, I just read a question. What kind of a temperament you need to have? This is preceding your personal decision to settle down in life. Why do you need to settle down is what your choice is. How strong and whatever you want to feel is certainly an individual choice. So once you have taken the decision, then you have to stick to it. That means that you would have to make adjustments. Professionally also, you have to make adjustments. Personally, you make your adjustments with your parents, isn't it? You make your adjustments with your siblings. You make adjustments with your friends. Then why not work? Today, if we are here at this platform, is courtesy work. So for me, it was certainly an applicable thing which I told my husband at that time before marriage. I said, certainly, as my father had told him, that you are going to be the second spouse, because I felt so strong about the profession before I got married. So it had to be absolutely clear. It was in my mind that this, I am here to stay and I have to have a planned career. So there was nothing like that. So if you plan it, then you place everything accordingly. Number one. Number two, I will now come to the second part of my cocktail is Geeta, family support. I have been very, very fortunate to have very, very understanding parents and my in-laws. And today, if I have to compete with anybody in this world for taking affection, vis-a-vis my son is my mother-in-law. Because for him, she is still the first mother and I happen to be the second one. And I have no hesitation to say so because she literally, and without her support, I could not have reached here because of the help I got from my in-laws and my parents, my husband and everyone. But it is because they understood my passion for the job. देखिए, अगर आपको कुछ करना है ना, तो उसके लिए जुनूनी होना पड़ता है.
Yes.
अगर आप जुनूनी होते ये तो पागल है, ये मैड है. मतलब ये मतलब नहीं होता है. आप मैड नहीं हो, आप में एक ख्वाहिश नहीं है, आप में एक रंज है. That means this is something you really want to do. तो दूसरा आदमी तो फिर ये देखता है ना कि this person is totally devoted. Nobody can ignore devotion. Whether it's God, whether your work, whether your family, nobody, it doesn't go unrecognized. So you are there to do something substantial. So the support keeps coming. Now coming to time management, as Geeta very rightly said, it's your own child, so you have to raise the child. It is a balancing act of time. You don't have to be lawyer at home and you don't have to bring home in the profession. Please trust me. When you are at the bar, you are a lawyer. You're not even a woman lawyer. I don't like this word. When I enter the building, I am a lawyer. I don't want to take any favors. I don't want to be recognized as a weakling. I want to be a lawyer. I defend my client, I defend my honor, and I defend my profession. And I'll defend anyone on this earth who wants me and who recognizes I'm good enough to protect. So I thought animals are victims. They cannot speak, so I speak for themselves. But I can tell you I have full ability to speak for human beings as well, provided you have that faith in yourself. So when you get married, you have to have faith and confidence in yourself to carry on that institution. When you become a mother, you must have the confidence to carry on. So time management comes naturally because you are determined to do first job for what you have loved. Everything follows and places in time. There are struggles in pregnancy. There are struggles when the child falls sick, when he's not doing well. The biggest part, women, I want to tell you is this: be guilt-free.
Yep.
Please be guilt-free. बच्चे को मैंने घर छोड़ दिया, हाय हाय है क्या हो गया? अरे भाई, उसने भी तो छोड़ा है, मेल कॉलीग भी तो बैठा बहस कर रहा है, वो भी तो बाप है. You think he will not be feeling for his child if his child is sick? Why should we say that only mother has got the prerogative to feel sad for the child when the child is not well? It's equally emotionally disturbing for the father also. But why should we be guilty? Why should I never felt guilty when I left my son for days together to do my environmental program. No way. My age is not going to come back. But I have seen to it that my child is comfortable. I have seen to it that my family is settled. Today also I have so many issues because I myself at that stage, today is COVID, I have elder parents at home, I have my siblings, everybody. But I have to realize that this can't stop me. There are ways and means to look at situations. So take situation as it comes, be confident of handling. So that means if you say, I don't want to get married just because I cannot handle it, that's a separate, that's your personal. Never bring the two things together. If you are committed to work, then everything will fall in line. If you are a committed human being, then whether you're married, you are unmarried, why bring these two things? Why give these personal things into public foray? No way. I mean to say, we are lawyers and we are so lucky to be in Delhi. We are so lucky, fortunate to be in such a wonderful atmosphere. And I think this is so rare. So I would say, you people are far more fortunate in many, many ways to have options, so many subjects, so many topics, so many things. We are, at least I can say I'm at the fag end. of that situation. So I can only share planning, absolutely yes. Casual, no. Nobody can survive. Don't take ad hocism. If you are going to be ad hoc, then please enjoy life, have a good time, no problems. But this profession is only here for those who want to stay and who want to take it seriously. No problems. Continue to settle in personal life. Things will follow. Even if you don't have a mother-in-law, you don't have a mother, don't have anybody around, trust me, you will, if you are determined, you will find your own way. This is an individual experience I'm sharing with you, but I can say so, of course, family has been the biggest support. India, that way we are very fortunate. From some or the other, some chachi, bua, tai, something or the other keeps falling. So I have no great stories to say that I have really fought 2 battles. I was fortunate. I may not be the best example for giving you suggestions, but yes, if I was alone, if I did not have any support of the family, I would have still done it, because I would have known that I am passionate about my work. I would have still raised my son, be as it may, in the same manner as he was raised otherwise. So time management with your determination is the must.
After hearing you, Anjana ma'am, whether it doesn't matter, even if the glass ceiling was made of steel, it wouldn't have survived, before all the resolve, the resilience, the fighter spirit that all 3 of you have shown. Having said that, I have to add just one, because at individual level, because all 3 of you stand as a story of individual success, despite and in spite of everything. At the same time, we are, with millennial children, they're coming into the profession, the expectations and the aspirations are quite different. And perhaps at that level, we would look at the bar and the more institutionalized way of addressing some of these issues. For instance, like the motherhood. Yes, there are so many women who are into the profession and they have managed. But yet, wouldn't it be nice to have a good working CREST facility that I don't have to become, because the profession is such that, you're out of sight, you are out of mind, because when you come back, everybody is like, oh, you are back to the profession. So, at that level, we would at some level, we would expect especially the Bar Council and the Bar Associations to take up the issues which make it more convenient. You all have paved the way for us. You stand as an inspiration, and we keep deriving our inspiration. At the same time, at institutional level, we do expect that something to come up and done in a more formalized way. Now, I was just going through the chat, and I think it's full of just the applause and all the compliments. There aren't too many questions, because between 3 of you, you have answered most of the questions that we could perhaps have thought of. But I would like to conclude this discussion with one last question. If you, on a lighter note, if you had this opportunity to change one thing, if you could go back, become like once again, like 2025 and start the profession, one thing if you could replan and redo, what is that you would like to do? In whatever order that you want to take, something that you would change.
Since I need to think about this, I'll leave it first for Anjana, and I'll to first answer. In the meantime, I'll think what I would have want changed.
Absolutely nothing. I would not want to change a thing about the way my career has panned out, the way I have gone about my journey. Very proud of what I have done. I take ownership of all the good, bad, indifferent decisions that were taken, and I stand by them. I do not want to look back and say 2020 vision I have, and this could have been no, absolutely nothing. I take complete ownership of all the good, bad, and indifferent things. So Sunita, just one thing that you said, about the infrastructural support. I would really like to emphasize that, whilst our families are giving us immense support, giving support to us as, we become mothers, and, I have remained single, but I know but for my mother, I would not have been able to, achieve half as much as I did, tremendous support from her. But we have young mothers, the other day I was reading, one of our very esteemed judges complimented on the fact that, so many women are now being able to attend court hearings because we are having virtual court hearings. And that's fantastic. Women are getting an opportunity to come out and, actually address the court. Wonderful compliment to give, wonderful compliment to give. But would the courts just for a minute step back and think how wonderful it would be if we were to have creches with our high courts and our Supreme Court and even our district courts? I mean, Anjana talked about being guilt-free. Yeah, I mean, why only a mother? We have male caregivers also to children, It's today, it's breaking the gender barrier. How wonderful it would be to have that kind of an institutional support. It's about time that, apart from our families, apart from our friends, our colleagues, the institution also gave us that support. So this is what I wanted to add to your previous point, but nothing, I'm going to change nothing. No advice to my 25-year-old self to do things any differently.
Awesome. Absolutely, love what you said. And then we come back to Geeta ma'am.
I don't know. It probably would be dishonest to say that I would be more tactful, because I probably would not be more tactful. I probably would be as forthright. I sometimes have to bite my tongue when I am so forthright. And the philosophy in Tagore's words is, where the mind is without fear and the head is head high, where knowledge is free, that's the place where I want to be. So if that's the place I want to be, law is the profession. And that's why we should be proud to be lawyers. We should be proud to do what we can do. But obviously, as women lawyers, I've been told, you're a bit loud, you're a bit aggressive, nobody calls it assertive, they call it aggressive.
Yeah.
So those things, I don't think I would change them, but I actually won't change them.
Yes,
but
I
would get back those statements back at my face again, I'm sure.
Yeah. So perhaps one thing to change in the ecosystem around. So, Anjana, ma'am,
I wouldn't change anything.
Anything.
No, I thought when I joined, I was in 2021. I continue to remain. So that I wouldn't change. But before I say one thing, the biggest emotional moment of my 42 years, maybe can I share it with all of you?
Please, ma'am, please.
Is the thing that there was the session which was being presided over by one of the judges who had retired and whom I had briefed soon after my marriage. You can say I was just married there just about for 15 days, and a brief came to me and we had to take an interim order for bank guarantee encashment. I had just returned from my honeymoon, by the way, and it was in the month of June. I had got married. It was in July. In evening, I was told that if you can do this, please do it by tonight. And no computers, nothing. So I said, yes, I'll do it. I said, very well. In the morning, you'll have to mention, and I can take the name of that gentleman is Justice Saharia. He had just been designated, and I decided to brief him. And I must say, there was a colleague of mine who had brought that case. We both of us sat down and, one page typed, tear it up, then the second and the third, how you remember, Geeta, how this typist pool used to be. So we hired one typist and we said, we'll pay you extra. So Saharia Sahab had almost thought, ye aisi faltu ki baat kar rahi hai. 8 to baj gaye hain. He said, you'll prepare and bring it. I said, yes, sir, I would do it. He said, by whatever time. I said, sir, you remain awake. I will do it and I'll bring it to you. It's my responsibility. So I got the support from the family. And we prepared the petition, and at what time we knocked the door of Justice Hari at 1:30 a.m. This I'm talking in the year 1981. So he said, and he was so supportive, he said, all right, let me see. He vetted and all. In the morning, we mentioned it and matter was over. 25 years later, he is chairing a session and I am not there. I was told that when some of the speakers said that the time constraint is there for women, they have to go home by 6. He said, then I rolled out this example and he took my name. He said, a girl just been married for 2 weeks, came and spent time and knocked my door at 1:30, and in the morning she did it. When she can do it at that particular time, why you guys cannot do it? So I was really moved. He openly acknowledged that fact, that time is not the constraint, it is the will which you have to do. And I think
Also the partner, ma'am. I think that's where I think women have to choose their partners
Yes.
carefully.
Very well.
I mean, as an individual,
Yes.
so I thought I
I'll
was
tell you
choked.
one anecdote before all this, because
Sure.
it's related to Anjana's. So I had my mehndi in the morning in one day on a Friday, and on Friday night there was an urgent case that I needed to do Saturday morning. So lo and behold, Pinky and I land up at the district judge. He sees this woman with the mehndi till her arm, and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm getting married tomorrow." So he said, "And you've come with the mehndi?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What?" I said, "I need a stay urgently. That's why I worked overnight and I've come." He said, "Get lost. Don't leave your house for 24 hours. You are getting a stay."
Wow, wonderful. Yeah.
Any participant, I think it would be unfair to not provide an opportunity for participants to ask questions, because we have exceeded our time and they have been extremely patient. So I'm happy to entertain any. I can't see too many questions in the chat box, so please unmute yourself and ask.
There is one question I see from Ms. Mrinalini Sen, and she wants to know from all of you, ma'am, to mentor us on how do you did the business development at every stage of your career, whether at 25, 35 or so on, because women find it a little difficult to dive right into it and seek work. So how did you do it? Just a little bit of personal examples or some words of guidance and mentoring. Should we start with Ritu ma'am this time?
Okay. So very quickly, there is no one golden mantra for, doing business development and getting work. There isn't. It's a combination of a lot of things. There is, of course, networking, which is important. You got to be seen in seminars. You got to be speaking at seminars. You got to be seen at, the business organization meetings, etc. The other way that you can, attract, so this is, of course, the very important part of it. Then the other way one can attract work is by actually coming across as the domain expert. Now, that is when you have these speaking assignments, that's when you write extensively on topics which project and give people to understand your domain expertise. So that is how. And thirdly, I think we need to not be territorial about our briefs. So very often, an assignment can come to me, which I may either find myself completely out of depth to deal with, or I can, I may be too overworked. What I need to then do is I need to toss it over. Now, you have seen that, on our forum very often. Now, this trend is catching up. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing, because that is where you are going to get your business as well from. So just 3 things. There is no, one size is going to fit all. There is no golden mantra to it. But yes, these are the 3 important things that I would say.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your pointers. Anjana, ma'am, if we can get your quick view on this matter.
Well, I would say that I mean to say, what you need to do, what you have to do is greatly dependent on your uh, insight, what kind of a future you are looking at, basically. But I can tell you one thing, that if you are an extrovert, right, if you can express yourself, like, you don't have to be feeling gender situations. It doesn't mean that, you have to be really extrovert and you have to be social. Networking and socializing is different thing. I can share my experience that I'm a very social person. I'm an extrovert. I like to talk. I can talk to anybody. But that only first way your work speaks. But these days it's not easy for you to show what your work is. So basically you have to be into some kind of a networking which is appropriate for your circumstances, your temperament. Let's not have a do's and don'ts. As he said, you can't have a straight formula. If you're an introvert person, that doesn't mean you can't do well in the profession. You in your own way can communicate. But let's today take one step forward, is this, that all of us, I have suddenly decided in the last 15 years that I'm only going to have women associates, and I love it. I love every moment with them. They are 40 years younger than me, 35 years younger than, but it's a backslap relationship. Be friends. And that is how you help women. You are supportive of the cause. If I get two associates with me, they are doing well. That is your investment. Today, I think 3 or 4 of them are here. And I can tell you they are doing so well by themselves because you have to instill their confidence. So if I have to refer something, you have done well, that person will refer somewhere else. So if you have to be a litigating lawyer, you don't have to depend on panels all the time. That is a very good start, I must say that. But it may not happen with everyone. So you have to learn in sharing. And of course, time comes after 5-7 years when your confidence is there. You can have family support, you can have friends. If you are determined, I'm coming back to my only one and the only one original mantra is this: your own self-reliance, your own confidence, and your own faith in you. Things would take.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arjuna ma'am, on that. And any additions to that, Geeta ma'am, from your side?
So I don't have any mantras actually, because I have let law do its own. I mean, I've just worked hard. One of the things when I came back from England was I went with my mother to Rishikesh and I went to the Divine Life ashram. And they said 30% of your income should be given to the poor. And I realized, I said, but I have no income. What will I give? And I could see I'm not going to have an income for a long time. So what do I do? And I got all these job offers, including Ford Foundation, but I had it in a bee in my bonnet that Pinky and I will start practice together. So that was the bee, and therefore I wasn't joining anybody. I had no money. So immediately then I wrote to Manushi. I said, can I do a Tuesday, Friday legal aid workshop for you? Because I want to help people. Then I got involved. Luckily, Justice R.L. Gupta, at that time, there were no people going to Tihar jail. I asked them, I said, they were talking, and then suddenly he had this thing. He said, High Court wants somebody to go to Tihar, and he wants me to go as district judge, but for me, the time is very little. Can you go? And you go twice a week and look after the prisoners who have no legal aid. I said, I'm so happy to do. So my career has been the most unplanned career, which is why I was saying that I really appreciate what Ritu has said. All I used to think was of devouring my work and working and working. So I would work with Pinky till 8 p.m. and then I would come back at 8 p.m. and work with my father from 8 to 11 p.m. So,
yes, and then the work will seek you, and that we have seen how the work comes to you. So, ma'am, I know there are so many people who I'm so glad, I'm so thankful to all of you. There is a colleague of ours, Haripriya, who wanted to ask a question. Just one last question, if the panel is kind enough to take, and then Haripriya.
Sorry to be the one student in the class who asks a question after the bell rings. I've always hated that student, but I'm sorry. But this is something which is really bothering me after listening to three of you. It was fantastic listening to the three of you, but it's really bothering me. All three of you clearly come from families where there's tremendous support. And I mean, it's fantastic what you've achieved despite support. Also, it's not easy. And I know it's a fantastic journey and you must have faced lots more than possibly what, you know, you've possibly done much more. But my query is this: I genuinely feel there are a lot of women who do not have the family support, and that is India's reality, right? We are possibly privileged. We are very, very privileged if we can today say we have family support. You will have more than 70% of lawyers today in court who do not have family support, including their own parents. They will say, why are you coming late from court? Why do you have to attend a dinner party being thrown by a judge or a senior or anybody? You'll have a husband saying, no, you have to cook lunch, so you can't do whatever is required. Once children are born, many women, if like when we were talking of the number of women in the profession, if you notice in the beginning, there are a lot of women in the younger age. If we now categorize the women into different age groups, we'll see when you start off, there are a lot of women. Somewhere it tapers in the middle age. From say 27, 28, when they start having babies till about 40, 45, a lot of people disappear from the scene and then possibly come back around 45, 50 when the children have grown up. So I feel that there are genuine issues which the lot of women lawyers face and who are not fortunate to come from families where there is family support, right? I mean, I'm happy to say I have the support, but I know I've seen people struggling. So don't you think we have to seriously move some measures? Creche is one of them. Working hours is definitely one of them, because even from a safety angle, it's okay to say I can afford to go back home alone in a taxi, but how safe is it in our country, right? The third thing is about the amount of time wasted in court. A lot of times, now I find virtual very helpful because I put the judge and my video off and I'm pottering around doing whatever work I have to do. But you can't do that when you have physical courts. So you're stuck there literally from 10:30 to 4, right? So maybe there should be a more efficient system of hearings, where the judges let you know what matters will be taken at what time, even when physical. For women, this felt more for women because men are benefiting from this whole situation, right? They don't care. They'll say they'll go in the morning, come back at night. So there are many women who suffer. So my point is, don't you think we need to do more and focus on that?
Quite right, Hari, that is something that goes without saying, which is why, when Sunita mentioned, I specifically took up that point. The infrastructural support is very important for women. Now whether it's in the form of creches or whether it's in the form of law offices and law firms providing safe mode of transportation back, that's these few measures are something that needs to be put in place. Organizations, whether it is our courts or whether it is our firms or it is our law offices, they cannot shy away from that responsibility. They cannot expect the women force to come into the pipeline of production and then kind of say that, okay, you've got to fend for yourself. I think that's true for even men. A lot of young lawyers, be they men or women, they don't have the transport facilities that as we progress in the profession we start acquiring. So yes, these are few measures which need to be put in place. Another thing that I wanted to add, which is slightly taking away from your question, but I think because you mentioned that there comes a point in a woman's life, during her career when she has to take a hiatus because somehow the responsibility is just assumed to be hers to bring up the children. That time need not be completely lost. Okay, even when one is on maternity leave or one is taking an extended break from work, we can use that time to upgrade our skills. We can use that time to acquire, different skill sets, so that when you come back, certainly the profession would have moved on. Certainly the colleagues would have moved on. Time is not going to stop for anybody. It's never going to happen. But you would then be in a race which is where you are not at a disadvantage. You would have upgraded your skills, you would have acquired different skill sets which can have a different which can give a different trajectory to your career. So really, I totally agree with you. Infrastructural support is a must. It is a given. Unfortunately, the kind of court systems that we have, it'll be very difficult to have predictability of time. Somebody will come for genuine or for trumped up reasons, will ask for a Passover, and you'll be saying, oh God, come on, man. But that'll happen. That's the collateral the hidden aspect of our profession. But most certainly the profession would do very well for itself if it was to take the initiative of providing infrastructural support.
On that note, I'm sorry, but I will. We have already, and I know our speakers have answered our questions. And perhaps where we are on the issue of women mothering or taking care of the children, taking off from the break, we need to look at perhaps more social changes where there is a more balanced parental responsibility, sharing of parental responsibility, where a woman does not have to prove herself to be the greatest mom. And in fact, Anjana ma'am wants to add something to that.
I just want to say one thing, that this crèche petition was filed way back by Meera Bhatia. It was allowed. And thereafter, several steps have been taken. I think, why don't we conclude it with one resolution? Why we don't let it happen?
Yes.
Why don't we take some steps to let it happen?
Yes.
Why are we continuing with the order?
Waiting for her to complete, then I'll answer the query.
Yeah, I was thinking that I was coming to it because I remember last year when we spoke, they said they would do it arranged somewhere or the other. Then they said very few children are there who have enrolled or maybe suggested. Maybe Kajal is going to throw more light on it. But I remember a year back when I spoke, I said, why are we not having it? You have the order by Justice Mittal also. They said they are looking for the space in the building. The building space is not there. So I'm just saying, today with inputs of Kajal, maybe we all can take a resolution. Now, let this happen after the COVID, whatever is the situation or physical happening of the court, let this take place now.